Hey, what's up, you guys? So today I want to do a quick couple videos. This is going to be a little bit separate from the main series that we're doing right now. This is the vinyl strip from AudioThing. This is basically a vinyl channel strip, and we're just going to go straight into it and do a quick little overview for you guys. You have the top section, which basically consists of your presets with a little drop-down menu. You have two arrows that let you go between them. You can save presets where it says save. You can delete them. You can also randomize all the settings, and you actually have this more section, which actually lets you add extra control to each feature. You have the dust noise envelope, which basically means that when you have that activated, the dust and noise will only activate when audio is actually passing through the signal. You have the dust noise louder, which basically makes the dust and noise louder. And you have the wow enhance, which actually makes the wow and flutter kind of sound that you get from the vinyl section very dramatic. You can actually hear the wobbling. You can hear the speed up and the slow down. And it's a really cool little thing. You can also swap modules. You have registration, an online manual, and an about section. This little button right here is the power button. When it's white, it's disengaged. When it's dark, it's on. After that, you basically have your main modules. And one thing that I think is really interesting is most of these modules, from compression, distortion, reverb, EQ, vinyl, and sampler, can all be moved around to wherever you want them to be in the actual signal path and the way that it's going to work and modify the sound, which is really cool. That's really rare. You don't really get a lot of plugins that do that. Let's get straight into everything. On the first section, all the way to our left, we have comp, or the compression section. You have a simple on and off switch at the bottom, and at the top you have a amount, which goes from 0% all the way to 100%. This basically allows you to control how much of the compression you're actually going to use. This does an automatic gain compensation, so the more you crank this up, the louder your volume will actually get. And you have a envelope section, which determines the attack and release. After that, directly to the right of that, we have the distortion section, which again, all these modules have an on and off little switch at the bottom. One thing that I find is really cool is that you actually have a odd and even harmonics section. You can actually crank the drive all the way up, and you can hear a huge difference as you go between the all odd or all even harmonics. After that, we have our reverb section, which basically allows us to use a very vintage style reverb, a very like rugged and very lo-fi kind of sound. And from the top, you can choose the amount, which is from 0% all the way to 100%, which basically means you can dial in how much of the actual reverb you want. You have the size from small to large. Again, that's from 0 to 100%. And you have the color, which is basically like an EQ little tilt thing. You can have dark or bright. Bright is really good if you want to enhance maybe the snap of a snare, and dark is great when you want to just kind of add some body to something. After that, you have the EQ section, which is basically a tilt EQ. If you go to your left, you're going to be boosting the low frequencies while also cutting the high frequencies. If you go all the way to your right, you're going to be cutting the low end while boosting the top end. You can choose your middle frequency right here at the bottom from 100 hertz all the way to 10,000 kilohertz. This gives you a lot of range and a lot of control, so you can actually shape your sound. Next is probably my favorite section in this whole thing is the vinyl section, which is basically what emulates the actual vinyl machine itself. You have controls such as dust amount, 0 to 100%, so you can actually control how much dust you're going to be getting when you're playing audio. And again, if you go into the more section, you can actually control if you want the dust to only be active when there's actual audio passing through it, or if you want it to be active at all times. You can even boost the dust to be louder or even enhance the wow. Next to that, we have the dust rate, which basically controls the rate of how often you're going to hear the dust. Directly under the dust amount, you have noise, which is basically the machine noise from vinyl machine noise. If you go to the right of this, you have the wow section, which is basically the wow and flutter of the machine. Cracking this all the way up basically introduces the maximum amount of wow and flutter, which is basically emulating the movement of the disc. It'll wobble around and even speed up and slow down at times. Again, if you go into more and you do wow enhanced, you can get a very, very noticeable wow and flutter effect. Now, again, to our bottom left now of this section, we have the modern and vintage, which is basically your way of controlling the overall frequency band and response of the unit itself. You can get modern, which is basically a pristine kind of vinyl with like a full frequency response, or vintage, which is a very telephone sounding, very colored, very like lo-fi sounding old vintage machine. And then we have stereo, which basically all the way to the right leaves it as is. There is nothing being added or changed to it. You're just kind of just leaving it stereo. While if you go all the way to the left, you actually fold everything down into pure mono, which so you're basically emulating a mono vinyl machine. Next on, we have the sampler, which is basically a bit crusher. You have the bit rate right here at the bottom, and then you have the bits, which is from 24-bit all the way to 4 bits. You can get a lot of crunchy sounds out of this. Directly under that, you have the bit rate section, which basically goes from 1 to 0.1. After that, we have our master section, which is basically our final controls. You have a gain, which basically goes from negative infinity all the way to 0 dB. And you have a mix knob. So all the way to the left is dry, all the way to the right is wet. This basically lets you control if you want to use the plugin to completely affect the signal or without completely affecting it. A really cool thing is if you have the wow set up really high, and especially if you're using the wow enhanced, you can really get a really cool phasing sound, which is great for enhancing something and making it sound a little bit thicker and a little bit wider. So this has been a quick overview over the plugin, and in our next video that we're going to upload, we're going to be doing a quick little show and tell of how these functions actually work and how you can use them. So see you guys soon and stay tuned.